You played my game, you gave me feedback on my game. My mind was absolutely blown by how much awesome feedback I got from you. You've wrote entire novels. I want to thank everybody who played the demo of my game, the prototype. Don't worry if you tell me my game is crap, because I didn't expect it to be perfect already. That just never happens. It's not really about getting it perfect at the very first shot. It's really just about iterating and improving until it is excellent. So I looked at your feedback, and then the first thing I did is I wrote down all of the things that are still problems that we still need to fix. The mouse buttons often get confused. Basic features and options are still missing. Enemies grow too quickly, enemies are too fast, enemies have too much HP, enemies spawn too quickly. The difficulty curve seemed off for a lot of people. The music didn't fit the game, and you might be right about that. But those things at the top, those are the things I'm not really all that worried about. What I'm worried about are these cards down here. I just put them on the wall and kind of tried to group them. First one just means it's kind of hard to tell if you're doing well or poorly, and you don't really know what's going well and what's going wrong. You're just kind of confused what you could have done better when you lose. Next group is just that there's not enough strategy to it, not enough depth, not enough things you can do. And also when you can't beat a level, there are not enough things you can experiment with. It's a bit too repetitive and boring at times. The game is too stressful, you don't have enough time to think. I made these green cards, which are basically more or less solutions, and if I found a good solution to a problem, I'll just put that under the problem. If you confuse the buttons, I'll just put some little icons next to it so you can tell which button does what. There's still a lot of content missing. Guess what? We'll just keep developing. Then for the difficulty stuff, honestly, that will just take some time. We'll figure that all out over time. We can also add a difficulty setting. Also, one thing you need to keep in mind is that I didn't really try that hard this time. I just released it. Yeah, and for the music, we're just gonna keep experimenting with that as well. So here's the first interesting problem though. Please give me feedback on all of these ideas before I implement them. What do you think about them? Do you think they will work? Otherwise, I don't need to implement them. But I think they're kind of decent. Let's have a look. So first of all, I want to show statistics at the end of the match. So for example, for your population, you kind of see when your population dropped, when you exploded too many creatures. And this way you can figure out a little more easily what went wrong and when it went wrong. And maybe we could also have some sort of little AI that analyzes this graph and shows you a couple of parts where you probably messed up. It could circle that and tell you, yeah, you shouldn't make that many creatures explode, that's really bad, because then you don't have enough to make it through the rest of the level. Then another one which would be really easy to implement is just every time you die you see a little tip. And then I also thought about a way to maybe give the player a little more immediate feedback. So the way I want to do it is have a little score on the top of the screen, a performance score that just tells you how well you're doing at the moment. So if you're hitting really good shots, if you're spreading your creatures effectively, if you have enough creatures and all of that stuff, you have a high score. It just gives you some real-time feedback on how well you're doing, because some people seem to have problem with figuring that out by themselves. They could definitely use some additional feedback so they can tell a lot better how well they're performing at the moment. And then when this feedback score at the top goes really high or really low, then we could also add some additional feedback in form of sounds or visuals. That's just like, super, that was great, or I don't want it to feel like trial and error. I really want you to know how well you're doing. I think with those 5 changes, this problem should be pretty much gone. Obviously we'll have to iterate on these features as well, but in theory it should work. Next problem, Reno, is there's not enough strategy, not enough depth, you don't have enough influence over the game. My first really big idea, whenever you detonate a unit, you get a new resource. So that would effectively add resource management to the game. And the way I imagine this is you still only have more or less 2 things you can do, detonate or duplicate, but then you have 4 additional abilities you can use every now and then. And in order to use them, you need a certain resource. and you get that resource simply by detonating your units. And then you can use that resource to activate certain abilities. For example, an explosion that deals damage to enemies, or spawning new creatures at a position where there are no creatures, or maybe stunning enemies, or speeding your games up, or instantly hatching all of your eggs. There are tons of things you could do, and I think this opens up a lot of cool opportunities for the game and for the player. I think it doesn't add too much complexity to the game, and we can introduce those elements one after another so it doesn't get too overwhelming at the beginning. But I feel like later in the game this could add a ton of strategical depth. I think we'll look into that. What do you think about that idea? Tell me. Then here's another big one. Because you don't really have enough influence over the game. That's what a lot of people told me. What I would really like to experiment with is that the direction you move the mouse in, so is also the direction the X face. So if you're moving your mouse this way, then the X will also face this way. Here's a little illustration. We could try the same thing for the explosions. Whenever you make your creatures explode. So you actually have to aim a bit, and maybe there's a little bit of decision making in which direction you want to make them explode, in which direction you want to deal damage. So that could be interesting as well. Then the final issue on this kind of group here is not enough things you can experiment with if you can't beat a level. And actually for that we could just create a little upgrade system like this. So you have different upgrades you can choose from, and you do that not while playing but between the levels. So before starting a level and after finishing a level you can decide between different upgrades. So if you can't beat a level, that gives you something you can experiment with, and you can try different strategies and different playstyles this way. Then another thing that just should stop you from getting stuck is I also want a mechanic in the final game that allows you to skip levels. If you can't beat a level, you have 3 jokers and you can skip 3 levels, and if you beat a level that you skipped, you get that joker back, something like that. I really don't want players to get stuck on one level and then they'll have to quit, because yeah, that's what you have to do if you get stuck. So next issue. Too repetitive and boring at times. So what we need to do is probably add different music, different backgrounds, more content, obviously. And then also I don't just want to create a lot of content, I also want to create some smart content, so objects that interact in interesting ways with each other, so I can do more interesting level design without needing insane amounts of content. So I cannot create 100 different enemies, that's probably not possible, but maybe I can create 20 or 30 that interact with each other in really interesting ways, so every time you combine them differently it feels completely different, and I think that's what I'm trying to go for. We'll have to see how we do that. So yeah, but the too repetitive and too boring part probably comes from not enough different stuff, not enough content. Especially at the beginning there are a lot of levels that all have the same kinds of enemies, so I can see why that is a problem. And then also at times the game is too stressful. You don't have enough time to think. The time is constantly running, tick tock, and you have to click all the time. Click, 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 click. Oh, click, 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 yeah, the easiest thing we can do about that is just allow the player to control the game speed. So you can pause the game completely if you want to think, then you can have normal speed, and then you can also have double speed if it's going too slow for you and you're getting bored. I'll just give you the full control over the game speed there. I don't really see any reason to stress you out. It's supposed to be a strategy game, so take all the time you want. I don't really care. Maybe you can get an achievement if you can make it without pausing or something like that. And then those two are the two really critical ones. If we keep adding stuff, will it still be special? Will the game still be special if we add all of that content here? This is all stuff you've seen in different games before, abilities you can use, upgrade systems. We have seen that in games a million times. I don't think that's a big problem. Just because other games did that doesn't mean that you cannot do it, but I'm really just worrying a little bit. Will my game still stand out? Will it still grab attention? Will it still be different enough? That's what I'm a little worried about, and honestly I don't really know. I think yes. I don't think a game like this exists yet. It's definitely not a copycat game, it's a very unique game. I don't know any game like this, so I think it's still gonna be unique enough. And then the last question, if we keep adding stuff, will I be able to get it all done? And I think if we implement all of that, we're absolutely at the limit of what I can do. Especially if I want to do YouTube at the same time. This right here, what we have on the wall, is the limit. If we need to add even more stuff than this, then I should probably make a different game, because then it will start getting a little unrealistic. This is already pretty ambitious, because I want to finish this within 2 years or one and a half year if possible. So some cool features like local multiplayer will probably just be cut out, but yeah, I think all of this is still doable. So tell me, what do you think about these ideas? Which of them should I try first? Did I forget any issues? I think I pretty much covered all of the problems you had with the prototype right now. So I really can't thank you enough for all of your awesome feedback. Make the world your playground. Have a nice day. See you in the next one. Peace out.